What's up, guys? Welcome to Roaring Podcast, where we interview experts in tech and product management, providing insights and tips on how to digitize and automate your business processes. My name is Jesper Kask, and I'm your host. In this episode, we welcome Christian Landgren on the show, CEO and founder of Iteam. Known as a bit of an API guru, Christian has an extensive background in software development and digital transformation, using APIs as a foundation for many well-known projects. Enjoy. Okay, so welcome Christian Landgren. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I figure I dive right in and sort of start with what might be the most difficult question of this podcast. What is an API and how does it work?
All right, we'll dive right into it. So this question is kind of hard because API means so many different things for so many people. So what I'm going to choose now is to limit this question a little bit to talk about web APIs. And that's usually what people mean anyway. But there are a lot of different types of APIs. But web APIs, they are what you can say. The best way to describe them is to compare them to an ordinary website for human beings. But instead of having all different logos and menu alternatives and nice colors and typefaces and all of that, an API is really just the basic stuff. And an API, a web API, is made for computers to be able to communicate between each other in a standardized way. So, for example, when you go to the tax office and you have their tax logo and you have a login where you log in with your bank ID and things like that. And then you could see your tax returns and you can enter different information. All of that needs a lot of user interface. But if the tax office would have an API, the only thing they would have is just simply, this is your tax return. Here is your information you want to send in. So it's very limited and very basic, and it's standardized, so it's always going to look the same. So even if an API, even if a website changes colors and logos and things like that, an API is designed so it's not going to change as often, which means that every computer that is connected to this will always get the same result. And so that's why you have this very important to have standards for different APIs. So I don't know if that was an easy way to understand, but that's the usual description.
And I think that's one of the issues that I noticed, having been part of an API-driven company at Roaring, for example. There's very few parables used to explain APIs in a simple way for a person who's not very technical or educated within this space. One of the ones I found early on was the waiter communicating orders between the dining room of the restaurant and the kitchen, sort of like an intermediate communication thing. In your opinion, what's the best way to explain or sort of dumbify what APIs really are for someone who's like me, not really technical?
Yeah. So yeah, I would say it's a website for computers. So a computer can have one standardized way to communicate with another one. And remember that the phone that we have in our pockets, these are also computers. So that's kind of the most used way for let's say for example an app to communicate with a server. That's usually done through an API. So the backend, the things that the apps are communicating with, those are usually APIs. So and that's pretty much what we do when we develop apps. First of all we design a very good user interface, and we ask the customer and the users what do they want and what goals are they trying to achieve. And then we see what APIs are there that we can use to facilitate those to facilitate those needs. And sometimes we also need to develop new APIs, and those APIs are going to be the same. So it's going to be websites for computers. So pretty much that sums it up for pretty much the 90% of the use cases.
And in terms of how this might work in practice, or what the user sees as a common user, for example, now of an app, like you mentioned. What do they enable, and what role do APIs play in digitization in society?
Right now, I would say that in the private sector, they are central. Like every company that have some sort of digital, and that's most companies. Otherwise, they probably don't exist anymore. Uh, if you have some sort of digital offering in some way, you probably have already an API. But in the public sector, I would say that the APIs are still not used that much. You pretty much have every government agency have a website where people, human beings, can go into and log in as kind of my services or mina sidor or something like that, and do their services themselves. But not many public municipalities or government agencies have APIs today. So this is something that I talk about a lot, like with politicians and also in the public sector in different ways, and because what could happen with kind of the public sector if they would start using APIs more is that you could start seeing different types of mashup services. So you can, instead of having to go to your school platform to report your kids sick into the school, and then go to Försäkringskassan to report for VAB or something like that, and then go to your employer and report everything there, and then talk to your customer saying that you're gonna be home today with your kids. All of those things can be merged in together into one very specified app that is aiming just for parents that wants to report kind of their kids to school. And this is just an example, and that's something we could do. That's something we could do for the whole society.
Yeah, as a parent, that resonated with me for sure.
Yeah.
Having 3 kids, I know all about VAB and Försäkringskassan.
Yeah. And today we actually have a really good example of this. I read this morning, or saw on the news, that there's, I think it's 6 months waiting time to get a new passport here in Sweden.
Yeah.
And someone named Lucas, I don't think it's his real name because I think he wanted to be anonymous, but he developed a Python code that looked through this website for the police and just looked and refreshed the page all the time. And as soon as it arrived a new booking time, meaning someone have or canceled their bookings, his script would just book that slot for him. Which is amazing, because that's kind of a good thing for him, and probably if people are in a hurry, they want to get the passport as soon as quick as possible. But then they also talked to the police, and the police said were very kind of frustrated with this, and so this is a moral problem, and you shouldn't be able to go before anyone else in the queue and things like that. And my reaction is like, okay, but that's a weird reaction. Wouldn't it be better if all the slots were taken as soon as possible, and that you would instead have a queue of people waiting to get every cancelled booking, and that queue could be an official service for the police. And wouldn't it be even better if this Lucas guy, were contacted by the police and saying, yeah, this is a good service, can we adapt that and offer that to our customers, and maybe have a control over the queue, so which also would relieve a lot of time for people waiting, just refreshing pages in their on their working day, and then have just a service for that to have rebooking automatically. And to get back to the point, this is an example where the police could have offered an API, and this type of services could have evolved from the market. So this is something, if they would have an API, Lucas wouldn't have to kind of parse the website and remove all the logos and all the text, and kind of find himself in a lot of problems with that type of service. But instead use an API to do exactly the same thing that he did, and also not have to be anonymous when he reports about this, but rather just send this out as a service to the people. So we could be better at kind of using the resources we have in the public sector by doing these type of collaborations between the public sector and the private sector.
And what are some, in your opinion, what are some of the most or brightest examples where APIs have been used to drive innovation or create change?
So I think that the most accepted answer to that question is probably Jeff Bezos and Amazon. They decided, or Jeff Bezos, he decided in 2001 when he learned about APIs that this is something they should do. They should use in their whole business. He said that nothing is internally even can communicate to another part of their kind of digital infrastructure without having an API. And at that time they were only a bookstore, so but they had a lot of success, and people were buying books from them. So that meant that at some point they wanted also to have kind of an interface between their IT operations and infrastructure department and kind of the developers. So the developers would have to previously send emails to that IT department, and the IT department would reply back in email. But after this decision that everything needs to be APIs, they had to develop an API to order a server between these departments internally. And that was a huge success, because that meant that on both sides they could automate all of these things. So instead of having to wait for an email and some person would get back from his vacation and then together with his crew set together kind of the infrastructure that was requested and then send an email back, on both sides they could just automate all of these things. So the developers, they could just automate that now we need a new server, and the IT infrastructure department could just have their APIs and then automate everything that they needed to do to put out kind of virtualization, all that. So eventually, this decision that Jeff Bezos had made in 2001 eventually led up to cloud computing. So AWS, that previously just was a bookstore, now became one of the the leading firms and the first company to offer kind of that type of automated infrastructure to the IT business. And now everyone has APIs for doing this. So that's kind of the most impactful decision. And now Amazon is one of the most valuable company, and Jeff Bezos is one of the richest person in the world. So that would be probably the best decision in his life.
Yeah. And what makes them so successful? You mentioned Amazon as one example. Google is probably another one that they use a lot of APIs and that are super API driven. What makes these types of companies so successful, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's mainly because these interfaces can replace manual processes. And you have a standardized way of communicating between different parts of your business. And I heard that Salesforce have 80% of their sales for their services are through their APIs, meaning that they have partners that sell their products. So now they don't have to have their own salespeople. They just have an API, and the salespersons that are more connected to the actual customers can just do all of their business automatically through their APIs. So, when you have that low friction for each new sale, because everything is automated, then new businesses can emerge. Businesses that previously wasn't maybe an alternative, because the transaction cost for each sale would be as high, so you wouldn't be able to do any margins on that. But with APIs and all these automations, you will find these new services that was previously not achievable for you to, or cost efficient enough for you to pursue.
And given the fact that there are so many companies and success stories in API-driven companies, we mentioned Amazon, Google. There are plenty more examples. Stripe is one that comes to mind. Why doesn't everyone use APIs?
Um, I don't know. I think that most companies would be better off if they had an API, because when you think about that type of problem, like we had a customer in the taxi business, and the first thing we did with them was to help them develop their own API. And that meant that and they just wanted a better app. And we said, okay, we can take care of your app, but the app is right now that they had was communicating directly with their own internal systems, and they had a lot of complexity about these things. So what we did was saying, okay, so let's define an API. And that decision alone was kind of what what helped them to kind of take care of their complexity in their own solutions. Because instead of having kind of lines between each different partners and directly to their own systems, they had just now one interface where they could have one part of their business talking to customers and helping them to kind of integrate through their API, and then another team that could work on building kind of and take away a lot of their legacy that they had before beneath the API. So what the API itself enables is kind of having two fronts, one from for outside for the services, but then also front from on the inside, because a lot of companies right now, they have built so much legacy and that they are maintaining. And the only reason why they can't stop using those legacy systems is that they have a lot of these kind of specialized integrations to different customers that are depending on that particular service is still alive. So the reason why we always recommend companies to start looking at the kind of having an API strategy is also mainly to have some sort of interface to then be able to remove a lot of these old legacy systems and then point the customers directly to your API instead. So there's a lot of reasons for companies to start looking at having their own APIs, even though they have no idea really what they're going to use it for right now. Eventually, there's going to be a use for it.
And so if we sort of paint a picture where every company has an API,
Yeah.
what kind of innovations would we see, and what's stopping it right now?
Yeah, so those are two good questions. I think the vision is kind of most interesting to talk about. So imagine a society where also not only the private sector is using APIs, but also all the whole public sector is using APIs. You would find yourself in kind of a situation similar to what they have in Estonia. In Estonia, they made this decision early on to use web services for all the communication. Which means that as a citizen in Estonia, you will never have to go into a website and put in information that you already have entered somewhere else. So all these different government agencies are interconnected to each other. So you will get much better service from you, and it's relieving a lot of time for people to start working on their actual work, because instead of just having to reply to email every time. And for example, the police or in healthcare, a lot of their work today is about administration. They take information from one system and they enter it somewhere else. All of that work is just because they don't have proper APIs between these different systems. Because if they would have APIs, then the computers could be able to talk to each other instead of having a human being in the middle. And that time that we can free up in public sector would be so much more valuable if that time could be spent on fixing crime, getting people more healthy, and getting time from teachers to actually be and helping the kids. So there's a lot of also problems we have today that is we can go back and see this. The reason for these different problems are that the administration workload for a lot of the workers are spent in these lousy systems. And another thing that is also interesting now is that you start seeing these. It's called RPA, kind of robots. They have named it really well. So they call it the RPA, meaning robotic process automation or something like that. Which basically is a script that looks at your screen in one form and finds the information in one system, and then it takes that information and then is entering it in different other systems by looking at your screen. So this is something you kind of automate your business. You automate your day by kind of, instead of having to fill these forms automatically or manually, you can have some sort of robot that takes care of this for you. But that's kind of the worst scenario, because then you're kind of forcing these forms to not change at all. Instead of trying to find an API where the form is up here, and then you have APIs between these systems so they can communicate in a good way instead. So all of this RPA stuff that is going on right now, this is just a dead end. It's going to lead to a lot of suffering and pain for a lot of human beings. And it would be much better to spend that time to think about what would an API be instead for communicating between these things.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the school platform, which is something you've been quite well known for recently and over the last couple of years. Just explain that briefly. What is the school platform, and what happened in that project?
Yeah, so the school platform, this is a really long story, and it's been covered in quite a few podcasts, so I'm not going to go into too much details, but pretty much you can say that the school platform is purchased by the city of Stockholm in 2013, and it was released 2018, so it's a lot of time that between the start of the project and the release date. And that's always a bad sign when you have a project of that size that takes 5 years, and then you're going to launch it with fanfare and confetti. You know that this is going to be bad. So and it was so it was really bad. It was it had security flaws. It was really slow. It didn't work. None of the parents wanted to use it. None of the teachers wanted to use it. So it was pretty much a disaster. And when I think it was 2020, the total cost for the whole project had at that point been up to $120 million. So it's a lot of money, just for kind of this type of administration system that would be able to help teachers to communicate with parents and to plan kind of schedules and setting grades for, and a lot of administration workload. That way they was supposed to be ease up their workload and administration with the system, but the reality was quite the opposite. So they had to take much more time than previously to use these systems, because they weren't designed for users. They were designed for selling products for consulting companies. So after 2 years of time, because I have 3 kids and I'm alone, and so that means that I have to. I'm really dependent on having this information really quickly for me. And I was so frustrated with this, so that was when I bought this hat. It says "Skrota skolplattformen," and which means that you should probably just trash the whole thing, because I was so frustrated. I would much better have an email every week with kind of this is the homework for the kids, and this is what's important for next week. That would be much better for me than having this really lousy system that didn't work. So And when I published a picture of this hat, a lot of people like contacted me, and also teachers at the school were kind of giving me compliments about the hat. And then I realized that they was this is something that a lot of people feel the same way about, of course. And so that formed kind of a movement on creating something else instead. So what we did was to kind of figure out the underlying API behind the official app, and then from that API we derived then a user interface that would actually be usable. And it turned out that a lot of the problems in the school platform today, still our problems, are related to the front end and not the APIs. So by just having a new front end, a new app that we made, that was pretty simple, pretty basic. Like you can see the weekly schedule for you and their homework for your kids, and if they're gonna bring something to the school, like those things that are really time consuming to find in the old system. We just summarize all of that. So if you have, as me, 3 kids, you just get a summary of all the kids, what's important for today. So instead of having to spend 10 minutes every day to go into that old platform, I just have one glance in the app, and then I know exactly what's going on. And then, you know, a lot of conflict appeared. You would think that this would be something that the city would be happy about, that we are actually coming in and saving their hugely expensive projects by doing something that would probably be something they hoped for when having an API. But it turned out that they didn't know that they had an API.
Oh.
So they had an API in the background, but the city didn't know that they actually had one. And that meant that it was kind of absurd situation where we had to explain to them how an API works, and that we are not hacking into their system because we are using their APIs that they actually are documenting in their code. So a lot of kind of frustration on both sides led up to kind of a police report from their side to that of course was turned down by the police, because the police said that this is not a crime. But I think that what's really important by that whole project was that we could explain what an API is and how kind of a better way of looking at digitalization could look like, and also paint a picture of how a society could look like if the government agencies and the public sector wouldn't necessarily create everything that the society needs when interacting with the society, but instead maybe count on the market to provide different integrations into things that you already have in your daily life. And then the society could just provide APIs so that people like me and others could develop the apps that would help people in their daily lives instead. Because ideally, I wouldn't have an app at all for getting this information. I would just rather have talk to Alexa in my kitchen, saying when are the kids starting today, and the Alexa would reply saying, William starts at 9, Edward starts at 10:30, and Sixten starts in 15 minutes. You should probably hurry. Something like that.
Yeah.
That would be much more, what user experience for me. That would be better, and that's something that the city of Stockholm would never have the resources to develop or competence to develop. But if they would have a good API, that's something that the market could develop instead.
Awesome. I love that. And sort of as we're coming up on time here, just finally for the ones who are listening, if you want to learn more about what APIs can do and how to use them, where do you start?
I would start, if you're in Sweden, I would start looking at apifirst.org. That's an initiative that we have started just to bring awareness to to what APIs are, and we have selected the date April 1st as a new official API day, API First Day. So it's a little bit of pun intended there. And then I would be curious. I would look through the different documentation, see good examples, look at Stripe's, the API documentation, for example, to see how a good API and also a good developer experience within an API is. And it will require a little bit of understanding if you're not used to kind of technical terms. But this is pretty much the same thing as when web browsers came along. It was daring in the beginning, but after a while you realized that you have to learn what the www means and HTTPS and how an email looks like. This is kind of the same thing. There's no easy way to just, explain this other than just putting yourself into kind of the school again and learn a little bit about what the APIs are. They are powerful tools for you to make better business, and that's what you're gonna do. And look at Roaring. You are a good example of this. You have a good API and a good developer experience, so that's also a good example of things you can look at. And there's a lot of really good APIs out there. So ask your developers in your company and let them describe what could an API in your organization be. And have your workshops with your post-its, and instead of saying this is a menu alternative in your website, this is an endpoint in your API. That's pretty much the same thing.
And going back a little bit to API First and April 1st being launched as the official API day, what are some initiatives connected to that organization and to that day?
So this is a kind of a nice idea with a few hours of coding. We just put together this website, and what we want it to be is kind of a place where we can connect all of these efforts to bring awareness to what APIs are. So right now it isn't that much, but I would hope that people that are listening to this and people that are talking about these things can get together and help building this into something that actually can describe better what APIs are. And one of our goals is actually also to update or suggest updates to the Wikipedia page, because if you search for APIs, official information about APIs, they're too complicated. You have to have a much easier way to do that. So that's one thing, and another thing that we have made last year was also to have a prize for Sweden's best API. Last year was Arbetsförmedlingens JobStream, their API for that. That won that prize, which is awesome. Government agency making the actual best API, that our jury of really, really awesome people looked at. I think it was 50 nominations of different APIs in Sweden. So yeah, that was super. And we intend to do the same thing this year. So keep an eye on that. And we hope that we get enough sponsors to do it with even more categories. So we have one category for web APIs and another category for kind of embedded APIs and things like that. So keep an eye of that, and please, if you are interested in these questions, be part of our group. We have a Discord and we have fun.
Super, that's awesome. Listen, Christian, it was great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope to see you soon again.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to an episode of a Roaring podcast by Roaring.io. Feel free to share it with your friend, colleague, or peer if you liked it. If you wish to stay connected to us, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.